What's up everybody, welcome to Wise Guy Gazette. Thanks for joining me again for another head-to-head video between some of my watches. This time we're going to be looking at sports watches or GADA watches, whatever you want to call them. And all of these are fit for small wrists and they're all in black dials. So I think this will be a really good comparison. This time we're looking at the Pagani Design PD1717 versus the Cestrian Master V2 versus the Watchdives WD1960S. Quick wrist check. I am wearing the green version of the Pagani Design today. I have two of these, one in black, one in green, and I actually have two of the Cestrian Master as well, both in black. One of them I brushed the bezel myself, and the other one I have the polished bezel still on it. The one that I'll be comparing today will be the brushed one. I think it matches the aesthetic of the other two watches better, but keep in mind if you buy this from the factory, it will come with a polished bezel. This is one of my favorite categories of watches. I'm always looking for a daily that can do it all. It can dress up, it can dress down, and it doesn't have the dive bezel, which sometimes, if you go to the beach, you can get sand stuck in it or things like that. So I do like having these water-resistant GADA watches that can basically be taken anywhere. I'll be running through every category and giving each watch a score on the scale of 1 to 10, and by the end, we'll see who comes out on top. So thanks for joining me for another head-to-head, and I'll get right into it. Starting out with the price. The Pagani Design PD1717 is about $71 right now, but I have seen it as low as about $50 during certain sales. The Cestrian Master is currently $161, but you can get it as low as about $105. And the Watchdives WD1960 is $79, and you can get it as low as $50 during sales. And this one I actually picked up from Watchdives used for $40. So it's the cheapest of the bunch, but generally these all range from about $50 up to about $100. Now moving on to the crystal. The Pagani Design has a sapphire crystal with blue AR coating. It's a single domed sapphire, so it does have a little bit of reflections. It's not the clearest crystal, but it has generally good quality, and of course it's sapphire, so I did give it a 7 out of 10. The Master is a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating, and it has no tint at all, so you can see pure black, no blue coating. It looks really good. It's flat, so it doesn't have as much reflections, so I did give it an 8 out of 10. The WD1960 is a mineral crystal, so that's the only one out of the three that's not a sapphire. But it is very clear. It has no tint to it, so it doesn't have a blue coating. And overall, the legibility is quite good on this crystal. I do wish they put a sapphire in here, but I'll give it a 6 regardless because of the good clarity. Moving on to the handset. The Pagani Design has a pretty basic handset. They're longer than the version 1. The version 1 had a really small handset that didn't reach to the minute track. But the V2 has pretty good length, not quite as long as I'd prefer, and it doesn't pass over the diamond markers like the Real Longines Spirit. So that's kind of a detractor in the handset, so I gave it a 6 out of 10. The Master, again, is a pretty plain handset, looks okay, the finishing is decent, but it has some sharp edges. And it's, again, not quite as long as I'd prefer. It doesn't pass right over the minute track, the second or minute hand, so I gave it a 6 out of 10 as well. And the Watchdives has pretty good length. It's the longest of the three. It has really good finishing as well, so I gave it a 7 out of 10. Nothing special, but still better than the other two models here. Next, I'm going to talk about the dial. The Pagani Design has a really nice flat black dial. It has that minute track or chapter ring that has the cutouts for the diamond indices, which looks really great. And basically the only thing I'll detract from it is that the fonts could be a little bit better. The font on the bottom of the dial is a little bit kind of robotic looking. Doesn't really match with the vibe of the watch. So I did give it an 8 out of 10. Pretty good look and execution on this one. On the Cestrian, you get a nice piano black glossy dial with a frame date window, which looks actually quite nice. And there's good spacing to the text and the logos, so I think it has a pretty well spaced and good looking dial. I also gave this one an 8 out of 10. And moving on to the Watchdives, again, this got an 8 out of 10. It has a nice deep black. It's a little bit sparse, but some people like the more minimalist style. And overall, the dial quality looks really good. So again, an 8 out of 10. For indices, the Pagani design has a really nice look and execution. I like the way that the Arabics flow with the dial. I think it looks really nice. The spacing is good. The alignment is really good on my copy. And overall, just looks very nice, so I gave it an 8 out of 10. The Cestrian has nickel-plated indices, which are, they look really nice. I do like the indices overall, very classy look. But the one issue with these is that the dots of lume on the indices are misaligned on pretty much every index. And I have 2 of this watch, and on both of them, the dots on the indices are misaligned. So I did detract a point from them. It would have been an 8, but I gave them a 7 out of 10. And on the Watchdives, they have very good finishing and they look quite nice. But on every single copy of this watch, you will have a misaligned 1 in the 12 index. It's a little bit higher than the 2 and just looks a little bit off. And this is by design, so it's not just an issue with QC. They did just design it this way, so I did detract a point, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. In terms of case design, the Pagani design has a very nice case. It has good turn down to the lugs. It hugs the wrist pretty nicely, but it's not an original case. It's based on a Longines Spirit, and it is quite thick. I believe it's close to 13 millimeters, so I gave it a 7 out of 10. Overall wears pretty nicely, but nothing special, and like I said, not an original design. The Cestrian, on the other hand, is an original design. It takes inspiration from some different watches, but it's really a beautiful case design, and it wears amazing for the dimensions. It's actually a 40 millimeter watch, but it wouldn't look like it on the wrist. It looks like a 38 or 39. It hugs the wrist really well. The turn down to the lugs is great. An overall really good case design and original, so I gave it a 9 out of 10. Moving on to the Watchdives. This one, again, is not an original type of case. It's very Tudor style. It looks like they're divers as well as the Ranger, but it's pretty thin and wears really well on the wrist. It doesn't have the most turn down to the lugs. It's relatively flat on the case back, but it is thin enough that it doesn't really matter, and the lug to lug is super short. So I think it wears really well on all wrist types. I give it an 8 out of 10. Moving on to case finishing, I gave the Pagani design a 7 out of 10. It's very solid. I think it's one of the best Pagani design cases in terms of build quality and case finishing. There's really good brushing and polishing, good transitions. It overall looks great, but nothing super special, so I gave it a 7 out of 10. The Cestrian, this is one of the biggest downsides to this watch. It's very utilitarian in the finish. It looks okay, but the brushing is coarse, not super consistent in terms of the directionality of the brushing. The polishing is quite good. It's mirror-like. It doesn't have any ripples or anything. But overall, I have to be honest, I give this a 6 out of 10. It's not the best aspect of this watch. It is utilitarian, as I said, but still decent. So 6 out of 10, I believe, is fair. And the Watchdives, I believe, is the best of the bunch. It's up there with San Martin and other brands like that. It really has crisp brushing, good directionality, polishing is really good, and the transitions are great. So I gave it an 8 out of 10. It's the best of the bunch by a good margin and looks really great. In terms of movement, these two have the same movement. They're both an NH35, and this is a VH31. All three are workhorse movements, not too flashy in terms of features, so I'll give them all a 7 out of 10. Moving on to the crown. The Pagani design has a really nicely designed crown. It's large enough to make it easy to use, and the crown action and threading is all very nice. So I did give it a 9 out of 10. I really like the crown. I think it looks good with the design, and I think it's really high quality. The Cestrian has a pretty unique crown design. It looks really good. It's big enough for the case, so it's very easy to use. The threads and the action are also very smooth, so I did give it a 9 out of 10 as well. And the Watchdives, this one, it looks okay. The action is quite good and feels nice, but it is too small. It kind of gets hidden by the case side, so when you go to reach for it, it's a little bit hard to access and a little bit harder than the other two. I think if it was a little bit larger, it would be a great crown. I gave it a 7 out of 10. In terms of end links, all three have female solid end links, so I'll talk about kind of the differences between them. The Pagani design has okay end link matching. It fits okay to the case. It fits the lug profile very well, but it does kind of sit proud of the case in certain places, and it's a little bit rattly. And also it has mismatched brushing, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine. The brushing on the bracelet is vertical, whereas the case has radial brushing. And so the way that it reflects light makes it kind of look like a mismatch between the case and bracelet. The Master has pretty good case fitment. It has aligned brushing, which I like. The shape against the lugs is quite good, but it has large gaps on either side of the end links. So I did detract some points for that, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. The Watchdives has the best end link fitment of the bunch. It sits very flush to the lugs. It has really good brushing, and the steel has almost the exact same finish as the top of the lugs, which makes it look very seamless, which is what I prefer in a watch. I like really good end link fitment as well as matched brushing, so I give this an 8 out of 10. Moving on to bracelet design, all three of these have kind of a standard oyster style bracelet. The Pagani design is the only one that really stands out though. It has fully articulating links instead of pinned oyster links, so you get a little bit more articulation. And I do find that this makes the bracelet quite comfortable. And it also has a little bit of a detail work with the separate pieces for the sides of each link. It gives it a little bit something special. So I did give this an 8 out of 10 for design. The Cestrian has a very generic oyster style bracelet, nothing special, pretty good thickness and quality to it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. And the Watchdives is the same story. It has a pretty generic oyster style bracelet. Again, all three of these have push pins, so there's no difference there. So I also gave this a 7 out of 10. In terms of bracelet finishing, the Pagani design has pretty dull steel finishing on the bracelet, not the best brushing, and it's a little bit rattly, partially due to the full articulation, but also I just think it's a lower quality bracelet, so I give it a 6 out of 10. The Cestrian, I gave a 7 out of 10. It's nothing special, decent quality to the bracelet. The brushing is not perfect in terms of alignment, but it looks pretty good. The finishing is just what you'd expect from a standard bracelet. It's heavy enough, so I think a 7 is a fair score. And the Watchdives, kind of a similar story. It's nothing special, a little bit better brushing than the Cestrian, but it's a little bit lighter weight, so it kind of balances out, and they both get a 7 out of 10. Moving on to clasp, the Pagani design has a pretty rattly clasp with only 3 holes of micro adjustment, and it does have a fold-over lock, which in my opinion is just more steps to take off the bracelet, so I gave it a 6 out of 10. The Cestrian again is a pretty rattly 3 micro adjust bracelet, but it is much lower profile and quite a small clasp, so I give it a little bit of points for that. So I give it a 6 out of 10 as well. And the Watchdives is the nicest clasp out of the 3. It's a milled 5-hole micro adjust clasp. It doesn't have a fold over, which makes it easier for me. And it's overall just a good, solid bracelet. No on the fly adjustment, but plenty of micro adjust, so I gave it a 7 out of 10. Moving on to build quality and QC, the Pagani design I gave a 6 out of 10. It's pretty solid, it's well put together, but there is one issue with my copy of this watch. There is a small speck on the dial, and it's not something that I've been able to dislodge, so I do take off a point for QC on this one. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. The Cestrian is really good quality. I consider it a great beater watch. It's very solid. It handles water well. I've taken it in the ocean and I shower with it. It's rated for 200 meters, but I don't really take that too seriously. But all I know is that it has handled water in my experience. And the one thing I'll take points off is for the dots of Lume on the indices. The QC is really poor on those. I wish they would just take them off. So I gave this a 7 out of 10. The Watchdives, again, pretty well put together, pretty solid. It feels a little bit light, probably due to the thinness and the smaller dimensions, and also the quartz movement. But I give it a 7 out of 10, basically the same as the others. They're all pretty well put together, nothing super outstanding, but really solid watches for the price point that you're paying. In terms of fit, I'm going to start with the Pagani design. The Pagani design's a 38mm case. It fits really nicely on the wrist. It has a pretty good design. It looks great from the front. In terms of side profile, it's a little bit thicker than the others and a little bit boxy, but it still looks quite good and has some turn down to the lug, so it fits really quite nicely. Moving on to the Cestrian, again, really nice fitting case. It's a 40 mil, but it doesn't really wear like it. It still looks good on my 6-inch wrist. I'll give you a little wrist roll. And moving on to the side profile, really slim against the wrist. Good turn down. It is actually quite thick overall, like the Pagani, but it looks a little bit thinner due to the turn down. And I really like the case design on this one. I think it just looks good on the wrist. And then moving on to the Watchdives, this one is the best fit for my wrist overall. It's nice and small. I think it maintains really good proportions. And in terms of the side profile, nothing special in terms of shape, but it is very thin. It's the thinnest of the bunch due to the quartz movement, so it does fit really nicely on the wrist, but not too much in terms of special case design here. It's a very standard case, but it just has good dimensions and looks good. So in conclusion, these watches traded blows and they had their strengths and weaknesses, but overall the Pagani design got 103 points out of 150, and that's a 69%. The Cestrian got 110 points out of 150 for a 73%, and the Watchdives got 110 points as well out of 150 for a 73%. As you can see, they scored pretty close. The top two are the Cestrian and the Watchdives. The Cestrian is a higher priced watch, so the Watchdives did do really well in this comparison, coming out on top in terms of value. I do love both of these watches. I'm pretty surprised by the scores. I think actually the Cestrian is my favorite overall. I have two of the Cestrian in the same exact color. One of them I brushed the bezel myself, which is this one. The other one I kept the polished bezel. It's truly one of my best daily beaters. I love that it has a date window. I love the way it wears, the design. It gives me kind of that Seiko Sarb inspired look, but in a little bit more of an original design and a little bit larger size. So I really like this one. And the Watchdives I just acquired, and I really love it as well. It fits the best out of all of them on my smaller wrist, and it looks good. It has good overall finishing. I think it's kind of a jack of all trades. Whereas the Cestrian scored really well in a lot of categories, but was let down by the QC and certain things like that. And also the case finishing is just not nearly as good as the Watchdives. So these two are really good, high-quality GADA watches. The Pagani design, coming in at a lower price point, is still really great. If the sapphire crystal is a must-have, then you would want to take this over the Watchdives at that similar $50 price point. But if you don't care about the mineral crystal, the Watchdives overall is a nicer quality, nicer feeling watch. So that's kind of a decision you'll have to make for yourself. But overall, I would recommend all three of these for the price. They trade blows, and like I said, they came out in a pretty similar score. And as I always say, you should look through each category and weigh them based on what matters most to you and make a decision that way instead of going by my overall scoring. This is just meant to be a guide to help you understand the strengths and weaknesses of each watch. Thank you for watching another head-to-head between watches. I like doing this series, so please recommend any other comparisons you'd like to see out of my collection. If you want to know what I own, check out my State of the Collection video parts 1 and 2, and if there's anything else you want to see head-to-head, just let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on another video.